Chernobyl accident is almost half a world away. Residents throughout the Northland are worried. Worried about the possible health effects from fallout, worried about the safety of our own nuclear reactors, and worried about the possible economic consequences of the accident.
In order to understand this process, we need to see what are the exponential functions. There are two types of exponential functions. There's the exponential growth and the exponential decay. Exponential growth is the change that occurs when an original amount is increased by a constant rate over a period of time. The graph of y equal 2 to the x is an example of an exponential growth function. Here are some properties of the exponential function when the base is greater than 0. The graph passes through the point 0, 1. The domain is a number, to the infinite. The range is all real numbers. The graph is increasing. The graph is asymptotic to the x-axis as x approaches negative infinite. The graph increases without bound as x approaches positive infinite. The graph is continuous, and by last, the graph is smooth. Exponential decay, however, occurs in the same way when the growth is negative. When a is greater than 0 and the b is between 0 and 1, the graph will be decreasing. The graph of the exponential decay is represented with the formula y equals a multiplying 1 minus b to the x. An example will be the graph of y equals 1/2 to the x. The properties of the exponential decay are the following. The domain is a number, to the infinite. The range is all real numbers. The reference point is also 0, 1. The graph is asymptotic to the y-axis as y approaches infinite. The function is 1 to 1. The graph is decreasing.
Some 20 years ago, one of the most serious accidents in the nuclear history changed the life of many. The Chernobyl accident is the most serious accident in the history of the nuclear industry. The accident occurred on April 26, 1986, when operators of the power plant ran a test on an electric control system of one of the reactors. The accident happened because of a combination of basic engineering deficits in the reactor and the faulty actions of the operator. Indeed, the consequence of this terrible accident lasted approximately 10 days. This led to a huge amounts of radioactive materials being released into the environment and the radioactive cloud spreading over much of Europe. Since the accident, some 60,000 people have been involved in the emergency contaminants cleaning and recovery operations, although only a few of them have been exposed to dangerous levels of radiation. Those who received the highest doses of radiation were the emergency workers and personnel that were on site during the first days of the accident. After the accident, people were exposed to radiation both directly from the radioactive cloud and the radioactive materials disposed on the ground, and through consuming contaminated food or breathing contaminated air. Some areas of Europe were sustainably contaminated, particularly in current Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine by the large quantities of radioactive materials released from the damaged reactors.
An example of an exponential growth is that over the last few years, there has been a massive exponential increase in mobile phone usage and market penetration. At first, only a few people had smartphones. Then, within only a few years, it seemed that everybody has an iPhone or a similar. And an example of an exponential decay is when a population of a certain species is affected by a plague or a disease. The population of that species will decrease over a period of time.
Exponential growth is a growth in number or size. Its changes remain constant over time. To determine the function of an exponential growth, certain points must be acknowledged. The form of the function is the following: y equals ab to the x, where a must be larger than 0 and b larger than 1. As well, the exponents must be positive. If it wasn't, the function would be for an exponential decay. The graphs must represent a growth. Exponential decay is the opposite for exponential growth. This represents the decay or decrease of a quantity or size. Some of the implications include the nuclear waste. This type of waste is incredibly dangerous and it must be cared for several thousand years. Nuclear energy is not a renewable energy, which means that many resources will be decreasing throughout the years.
We consider nuclear energy to be clean energy, since the emissions of nuclear power plants consist only of hot water. The amount of CO2 and other climate-changing substances come in incredibly small amounts. Besides, if its waste and production is correctly managed, the geological and environmental damage of nuclear energy is very limited. Nuclear Center Laguna Verde is the only nuclear plant located in Mexico. It is located in the city of Alto Lucero de Gutiérrez Barrios in Veracruz. This nuclear center is very close to a lake. This causes danger to the ecological integrity of the lake.
In the aspect of technological and energy development, it is important for the country to advance. On the other hand, it involves a huge security danger not only to the workers on the plant but to the whole area. In the worst aspects, to the near cities.
The Chernobyl disaster could have been prevented. First of all, the incident happened during night, when the shift of the time weren't fully trained and didn't own the correct safety equipment. The main part of the incident was caused by a test run to improve the security, but the problematic there was that they tried to test a method that included a process that they couldn't fully control. It was made manually. They must have understood the process before testing it.
We don't believe there could have been a way of preventing the radiation spread. The radiation reached some cities near Chernobyl, but it couldn't have reached Mexico since the distance wouldn't allow it. Some of the environmental effects would be acid rain, external radiation, radiation on agricultural lands, increase in mortality, and decrease of reproduction of plants and animals. The environmental impact of nuclear power is distinguishable, depending on how much radioactivity it receives. It increases the risk of cancer, greenhouse gas emissions, and causes several natural disasters like earthquakes and storms. The use of nuclear weapons are catastrophic. We've seen the consequences on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and how these powerful weapons can destroy an entire city.
We think that these consequences, at a certain point, could have been avoidable. But now the nuclear power has gone too far, and solving the situation is now way more complicated than it used to be. The main solution left would be to slowly abandon the nuclear plant and production of nuclear energy and use more eco-friendly alternatives. It is indeed hard to work on a team when the team members are from different campuses. At the end, we could work it out, but it was difficult. We like it that we get to meet different people from the ones we see every day, and we learn different ways of teamwork that we could use on a future.